If you sit down at set of sun and count the acts that you have done, and counting find one self-denying deed, one word that eased the heart of him who heard, one glance most kind that fell like sunshine where it went, then you may count that day well spent. But if through all the livelong day you've cheered no heart by yea or nay, if through it all you've nothing done that you can trace that brought the sunshine to one face, no act most small that helped some soul and nothing cost, then count that day as worse than lost. I'll tell you the story of Jimmy Jett, and you know what I tell you is true. He loved to watch his TV set almost as much as you. He watched all day, he watched all night, till he grew pale and lean. From the early show to the late, late show, and all the shows between. He watched till his eyes were frozen wide, and his bottom grew into his chair, and his chin turned into a tuning dial, and antenna grew out of his hair, and his brains turned into TV tubes, and his face to a TV screen. And two knobs saying Vert and Horace grew where his ears had been. And he grew a plug that looked like a tail, so we plugged in little Jim. And now, instead of him watching TV, we all sit around and watch him.
If, by Rudyard Kipling. If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you. If you can trust yourself when all men doubt you and make allowance for their doubting too. If you can wait and not be tired of waiting, or being lied about, don't deal in lies, or being hated, don't give way to hating, and yet don't look too good, nor talk too wise. If you can dream and not make dreams your master, if you can think and not make thoughts your aim, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two impostors just the same, if you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools, or watch the things you gave your life to broken, and stoop and build them up with worn-out tools. If you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss and lose, and start again at your beginnings and never breathe a word about your loss. If you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are gone, and so hold on when there's nothing in you except the will which says, hold on. If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings nor lose the common touch, if neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you, but none too much, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it, and which is more, you'll be a man, my son.
the Christmas season as portrayed in motion pictures. Many of my fellow Readers Theater members and I believe that millions of Americans have had their thinking about the holiday season influenced by movies. That brings up the question, what is your favorite holiday time movie? Maybe you like one of the modern ones like Polar Express or Home Alone. Perhaps you hearken back to the classics such as Jimmy Stewart in It's a Wonderful Life. Or maybe you were enthralled by that little girl, Natalie Wood, in Miracle on 34th Street. Yes, we all have our favorites. I have a favorite movie. Let me give you a clue as to what that movie is. Ralphie, you'll shoot your eye out. You guessed it right. That's little Peter Billingsley, that 9-year-old, in the movie A Christmas Story.
Higby's corner window was traditionally a high water mark of the pre-Christmas season. First-nighters, packed earmuff to earmuff, jostled in wonderment before a golden, tinkling display of mechanized, electronic joy. There it is. The holy grail of Christmas gifts, the Red Ryder 200-shot range model air rifle. And there he is, Red Ryder himself. In his hand was the knurled stock of as coolly deadly looking a piece of weaponry as ever I had laid eyes on. For weeks, I had been scheming to get my mitts on one of these fearsome blue steel beauties.
A Christmas Story was supposed to have taken place in the fictional city of Homan in northern Indiana. But in real life, it was all filmed in Cleveland, Ohio. Well, it so happens that I was born and raised in a suburb of Cleveland, Ohio. And it was a ritual with my family members to take me down to that very same department store, Higby's, to gaze into that wonderful window, the very same window where I could fantasize about all the toys I saw in there. The parallels with Ralphie and me are rather remarkable. I was about the same age as he showed in the movie in the late 1940s, and I even had lighter colored hair just like Ralphie had. So you might be able to discern why this particular movie, A Christmas Story, has become one of my favorites. Well, that brings up the original question again. What is your favorite holiday time movie? Now, as I leave you, I just want to say one thing. Merry Christmas.
The English Channel, Christmas Eve, 1944. Our B-17 bomber plane was beginning its descent through a heavy fog, but my mind was on the mission that we had just completed, our 19th. 16 more to go before we can go home, I thought to myself. But would I survive them? were the other 9 men in my crew. After so many months together, they were more than just a crew to me. I would never have made it this far without their friendship. At 23, I was a staff sergeant and the oldest man in our flying fortress, as the B-17 was known. And because of my sharpshooting and a stature that had earned me the nickname Shorty, I was assigned to the ball turret gunner position. This morning, our crew had taken off from England as the lead bomber in a V formation. My turret was pelted with flak and enemy gunfire, and from my position hanging below the plane, my heels held in midair by footrest. I watched in horror as the plane on our left took a direct hit. And moments later, the plane on the other side caught fire and hurtled to the ground. This was hell, and I was sure of it. I pressed my foot to the controls of my sight range reflector and gripped the hand controls to position the machine guns on either side of me and fire at enemy planes. Their guns, I knew, were pointed straight at me. You take out the ball turret gunner and you took out one of the B-17's greatest defenses. And somehow, amidst all the gunfire, we made it to Germany. We dropped our bombs and turned back across the channel, praying we would land safely on the other side. A familiar thud told me that our plane had touched down, and I said a silent prayer of thanks for our pilot. It wasn't easy landing a flying fortress in this kind of fog. We moved slowly down the runway and finally came to a stop. And the intercom in my turret crackled. "Zero visibility in this fog." The pilot reported, "We're ordered to stay in the plane until we all get the clear." I groaned. It had been 10 hours since I'd climbed into my cramped turret. I was exhausted, I was hungry and cold, and I knew the rest of our crew felt the very same way. I climbed out. The guys were huddled together in the body of the dark, chilly plane, and I sat next to someone, but it was hard to make out whom in the darkness until he spoke. "Don't suppose they'll be bringing us a turkey dinner in here, do you?" he said. Harold Boker, our bombardier. Boker the Joker, we called him. He was always ready with a one-liner to lighten the mood. Although he was only 19, we all looked to Harold when we were weary or afraid or just needed some reassurance that this war wouldn't go on forever. Well, tonight, however, his joke fell flat. This was no way to spend Christmas Eve, dodging bullets, dropping bombs, and shivering in the dark. I wanted to be back home in Wisconsin with my wife and our 2-year-old daughter, and I imagined us all sitting in our warm living room, maybe looking up at the lights on the Christmas tree. That's what Christmas was all about. Light, not darkness. Love, not war. We couldn't be farther from Christmas than we are right now, I thought. And next to me, Boker started to sing. His voice was soft, but the familiar melody seemed to fill the cavernous body of the plane. "Oh, come, all ye faithful." And while he sang, Boker lit a match. It was only a tiny flame, but the plane immediately felt warmer. And then Boker passed me his matchbook. "Lord, we greet thee," he sang, "born this happy morning." And then I lit a match and passed the book down, joining my voice to his. And one by one, each of us lit a match until we all held up a light. When one match burned out, we lit another. And next we sang Silent Night, humming along if we forgot a line. And after the terrible thunder of gunfire, the night did seem silent. I thought about Jesus on the night he was born. He had many dangers ahead of him. He would face death just as we would face it on our very next mission. But on that night, surrounded by his loving family, he had peace, just as we had it right now. The final words of the carol filled the plane and faded as the last of our matches burned out. Darkness swallowed us up again. But I could still see the light in my mind, the light that had shown the tearing eyes of every guy in my crew. Never had Christmas felt so real as it did that night. And in the midst of war and darkness, we had found love and light. Our crew completed all 35 of our missions. All 10 of us returned home safely, but not before we'd found a little bit of Bethlehem in B-17.
Every who down in Whoville liked Christmas a lot. But the Grinch, who lived just north of Whoville, did not. The Grinch, he hated Christmas. I mean, the whole Christmas season. Now, please don't ask why. No one quite knows the reason. Well, it could be his head wasn't screwed on just right, or it could be perhaps that his shoes were too tight. But I think that the most likely reason of all may have been that his heart was 2 sizes too small. Well, he stood there on Christmas Eve, hating the Who's. So the Grinch comes up with an idea, an awful idea to steal Christmas. So he takes all of the presents and decorations from all of the houses in Whoville. All the Who's still a snooze. When he packed up his sled, he packed it up with their presents, the ribbons, the wrappings, the tags, the tinsel, the trimmings, the trappings, and pooh to the Who. He was Grinchiously humming. They're finding out now that no Christmas is coming. They're just waking up. I know just what they'll do. Their mouths will hang open a minute or two. Then the Who's down in Whoville will all cry, boo-hoo. That's a noise, grinned the Grinch, that I simply must hear. So he paused, and the Grinch put his hand to his ear. Why, this sounded merry. It couldn't be so, but it was merry, very. Every Who down in Whoville, the tall and the small, they were singing without any presents at all. He hadn't stopped Christmas from coming. It came. How could it be so? He came without ribbons, and it came without tags. It came without packages, boxes, or bags. Then the Grinch thought of something he had never thought before. Maybe Christmas, he thought, doesn't come from a store. Maybe Christmas, perhaps, means a little bit more. And what happened then? Well, in Whoville, they say that the Grinch's small heart grew 3 sizes that day. So he brought back all of the toys, all of the presents, and all of the food, and he himself, the Grinch, carved the roast beast. Merry Christmas. I dropped my thing.